The North Mayo Pyrite Group, it feels like a long time ago since they set up in the hotel in Gisala, 6 or 7 years ago to be precise. And they are still in a situation where lots of outstanding issues have to be resolved for the members of that group. There's talk of new legislation as well. The feeling that their houses are built out of Weetabix blocks kind of sums up the effect of any kind of weather conditions out there on the blocks used, the material in the block, should I say, for people who find themselves caught in the pyrite crisis. I'm joined by a member of that organisation, a member of the North Mayo Pyrite Group, Martina Hegarty. Good morning to you, Martina. How are you?
Good morning, and thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, it wouldn't not have this story on, to be honest with you. I can't believe it's been so long and you're still looking for redress. It's just not acceptable, particularly when one thinks that these are homes of families who are so severely affected as they watch their houses crumble around them. Martina, I know there are issues that members of the group are trying to address with the legislators, but before we go to that, can you tell us a little bit about your own personal story and that of your family?
Yeah, sure. I guess this was kind of found out about in about 10 years ago by two great ladies in Balmullet, Josephine Murphy and Dorothy Kane. Both of those really led the campaign in Mayo for a number of years. The North Mayo Pyrite Group really came on board in 2020, just in relation to highlighting. Originally, it had been thought that the main impact was just around the Erris Peninsula, but we found over the last few years that, it's throughout Ballina, it's in Westport, it's in Caspar, and my house is actually in Crossmolina. So I guess I always thought that there was something wrong. I was just convinced, I suppose, by other people that it was settlement cracks. I had quite a lot of hairline cracks for a number of years throughout all of the rooms in my house. And really in the past 18 months, all of those cracks really began to show quite a lot more. Some of them are quite big at the moment, and my house is doesn't hit the curve as everybody else's. I have more cracks inside my house than I do have outside my house. And I guess one of the reasons for that is I do have a bit of shelter at my gable wall, and it has helped slow down the process a little bit. But I'm in the same position as thousands of homeowners are and will be in Mayo, that my house is going to have to be demolished.
It's a tough one. It's a really, really hard one to have to sort of process. And you've been dealing with the sort of psychological impact of this for years, and yet you're still in a situation of watching it deteriorate all around you. What has the group achieved, the North Mayo Pyrite Group, on behalf of yourself and indeed other homeowners that are in the same plight?
Yeah, so I guess the main reason our page was set up originally was just like share information. There were so many of us that were finding ourselves in the same circumstances, but we didn't really know where to go. So it was set up as kind of a support group originally, and then we became heavily involved in the campaigning side of it. We were leading from the Mayo perspective up in Dublin, and then we were part of the working group, so the conversations with the government all throughout to November really, where the enhanced scheme was announced. So there is a scheme in place at the moment. It's known as the 90-10 scheme. When that scheme was announced and basically put up and running in January of 2020, it was sold as all bells and whistles. You're only going to have to pay 10% to rebuild your home. But in reality, when people started going on to the scheme, they found out that it was actually more like a 60-40 scheme. So loads and loads of homeowners were just not in a position to be able to afford to rebuild their homes. So that was part of the main campaign, is to look at the previous scheme, call out what the shortfalls were, and really try to drive the government with the support of our local TDs to get it right, to get it fit for purpose, and make sure that nobody was left behind. In November of last year, there was a couple of improvements, we'll say, to the enhanced scheme. And literally since then, we've been talking to the government 2-3 times a week to try to get the scheme right. And at this stage, the scheme and the updated legislation is supposed to come out next week. We're really worried that we're going to land back in the same position again. So we're calling on our local TDs to come out and support the people of Mayo that are not going to be able to afford to rebuild their homes without a full support from them.
For anybody who might be thinking that, you know, the legislative process should be conclusive, in that there's the committee stage as well, you have where you have a panel of experts analysing what is essentially a bill until it becomes a piece of legislation. Is that happening in this case?
Realistically, the legislation is supposed to come out in draft format next Tuesday. From then until the 21st, there is going to be a little bit of an internal review, but mostly between the party leaders themselves, and then it will be published. Our concern is it's going to be fast-tracked then through the Dáil, which means there's no opportunity left for pre-legislative scrutiny. So there's going to be no room for experts to go in to review it. There's going to be no peer-to-peer review where legal experts will go in, look at the finer detail and make sure that that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's really critical. Like anybody that writes a paper, you know, you'll even get somebody to spell check it for you. Like realistically, somebody needs to go in and check this legislation and say that it's fit for purpose. And right now, it looks like there's a strong probability the government are going to waive that process.
And what could change all of that in the meantime?
Well, we have a couple of campaigns going at the moment. One, we have a petition out there to make sure that the pre-legislative scrutiny happens. But the real important thing is that we need our local TDs. So we need Alan Dillon, we need Michael Ring, we need Derek O'Leary, the people that have sway in the Dáil circle, to actually stand up for the people of Mayo and come out and say, this scheme is not right. We stood up and we voted for 100% redress for all of the Mayo homeowners in June of last year in the Dáil. And we have to stand by our word and back the people of Mayo.
And what's stopping that happening? You're just trying at the moment, I presume, to ensure that that does happen, or can the public help?
Well, we're trying to put additional pressure on all of the TDs just to make sure that they do the right thing for it. But we're also trying to rebuild the awareness as well. Like, things have gone kind of quiet, just to be honest, over the past while, because we have been heavily involved in the discussions with the government. We have, I suppose, a tiny bit of hope that they will do the right thing, but we've been burned before, so we just need to make sure that all our bases are covered.
And I mean, if we could have a crystal ball and see a positive result in the context of this legislation, any idea what kind of time frame there might be before people like yourself, Martina, could see a situation where you have a house that you can assume is going to stay standing around you?
Well, the plan at the moment is the legislation will be approved by the end of July, so before the summer recess, and then the new scheme should be up and running probably around October this year. So that would mean people in my own situation are going to be able to move forward and start to rebuild our homes without burdening ourselves in a mansion of debt. We bought our homes before. We're paying off mortgages for our homes. We shouldn't need to get a mortgage to have to pay for our homes a second time.
Mm. And I suppose there'll be people out there who'll be wondering about the likes of structural guarantee schemes, insurance, going after the individuals who produce the products. I mean, where has all that gone wrong?
So there is legal cases from Donegal that's happening at the moment, as far as, I suppose, chasing all of those individuals that you have just spoken about. From the government side, we have said that any homes that are rebuilt basically have to be guaranteed, that the The banks, number one, will still give you a mortgage with that particular house. Also with the insurers, like in my own personal situation, the only thing that I can get insurance on at the moment is the contents.
Yes.
I can't get insurance on my house at all. And there's so many of us that are in the same situation. So God forbid if anything happens to my home, the only thing that's insured is my contents. They won't insure anything else.
And I'd imagine on a personal level, the stress over a number of years of uncertainty and watching the house deteriorate around you must have been very difficult for you and everybody else affected.
Yeah, and it is. And I guess because we're kind of front line at the moment, we're fielding a lot of questions and trying to support quite a lot of homeowners as well. And you know, I won't lie, there isn't a lot of sleep some nights.
Sure.
And you're really worried about other people's situations as well as your own. But there is real power in the people, and what we need to ensure is that the people of Mayo don't forget us, because you know, we get out and we fight for other people's campaigns, so it's really important that everybody in Mayo rows in behind us as well.
Yeah, well, listen, it's been wonderful to share the airwaves with you. I hope it'll help in terms of support for this important interim period between now and the legislation. Perhaps you might just share some contact details of the North Pyrite Group as well, Martina, for anybody who might be affected and wants to get in touch.
Yeah, sure. So you'll find us on Facebook. There's both a private and a public group, the North Mayo Pyrite Group. You'll also find us on Twitter at Mayo Pyrite. So there's lots of opportunities to be able to connect with us.
A pleasure, and I'll be keeping an eye on the story. Get in touch anytime you need to get access to the airwaves as well. Well done on all the hard work to date, Martina. Take care.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Martina Hegarty there. I mean, can you just picture being in that situation? It's all very well chatting on the radio and sharing the stories of people, but the reality of living in a house where you feel like every time you look out at the weather that your house is going to be absorbing that the elements, so to speak, and that is going to be reflected in cracks and deterioration, and then multiply that by a number of years. We're talking 6 to 7 years since the group actually set up, the North Mayo Pyrite Group. They're at a point where they're still living in those houses because they're paying mortgages. They're not in a situation to go off and rent somewhere else. They're looking at houses they can't sell. They're looking at choices that are so constricted because they can't move. I mean, we're all familiar with you know, recession and people's need to maybe move on, maybe even downsize if they can't afford a house they have. None of those choices are open to these people. They're looking for a solution. They're looking for redress, and they're looking for the government to do what they can and do something that's fair.